So this next session is really good. It's a one-on-one conversation between two folks from iHeartMedia. Hopefully you know what iHeartMedia is. It's one of the biggest players in music on many different platforms, and if not, you're about to learn a lot more about this. Our interviewer is a really good friend. I've known her for some time, and she's been helpful on this for the last couple of years, so we thank her for that. She's a director of revenue strategy and analytics at iHeartMedia. She oversees the digital revenue management practice and leads a business analytics team. There's that word, analytics again, responsible for evaluating business performance and providing strategic direction for optimizing broadcast and digital revenue across their platforms. Prior to that, she worked at Universal McCann in Israel, so she has international experience, and where she managed major advertisers' campaigns. She has a BSc in mathematics from Tel Aviv University and an MBA from Columbia Business. I want you to welcome to the stage Leerone Anolik.
So thank you all for being here and sticking around. I know this is the last conversation, so we'll make it super interesting for you guys. I first attended this conference. I met Dolly 5 years ago as a grad student, so I'm really honored to be here on the other side of things and on the stage. And I'm really excited presenting our next speaker, someone that I've known for the last couple of years working at iHeart. He's one of the most creative, fun, and passionate people at the company, Owen Grover. So Owen has been actively involved in the music and entertainment industry for over 20 years. He joined iHeart at 2005 and held a couple of different roles there. He's currently the executive vice president of content and distribution, and he oversees the our digital content. He and his team are charged with really developing our compelling, innovative editorial and video assets, as well as audience growth strategies to ensure that the company's digital platform continues to flourish. Before we jump in, why don't we just show a video and present you to what iHeart is really about.
How much do we love iHeartRadio?
Thank you to iHeartRadio for supporting me.
iHeartRadio! iHeartRadio! Love you guys, iHeartRadio.
103.5 Kiss FM. It's Angie Taylor from Fred and Angie.
Hey, I'm Bobby Vaughn. Elvis Duran in the Morning Show.
No matter what people are saying about me, what's going to come through is who I am.
It's The Woody Show.
Rover's Morning Glory.
Big boy!
Bitch, I never said I was coming with monkeys. I don't have no damn monkeys.
It's John Jane Rich.
Delilah.
We are the Breakfast Club.
Who am I to have an opinion?
WGCI, I'm Kendra G.
The Steve Harvey Morning Show.
It's Valentine in the Morning. It is On Air with Ryan Seacrest. And the haters gonna hate.
You'll thank me later.
An important program called Show Your Stripes.
Mobile is anything you want, anywhere you want.
Radio is important because it travels.
This is the iHeartRadio Music Festival! We've got the biggest artists on the planet under one roof.
Hard love! Hard love!
This is iHeartRadio Country. Are you guys ready for a good time tonight?
11 of the hottest Latin artists on one stage.
iHeartRadio, they've come up with so many amazing ideas.
When the stars come out, am I the only living soul around? Need to believe you could hold me down, 'cause I'm in need of something good right now. We could be screaming till the sun comes out, and when we wake, we'd be the only sound. Get on my knees and say a prayer, change round. That can make your hands clap.
Radio.
iHeartRadio Secret Session with Taylor Swift.
This was the iHeartRadio Secret Session in New York City.
iHeartRadio is the way I get to you.
Dream, work hard, and maybe someday somebody will be giving you an award, calling you an innovator.
Doesn't it make you feel good?
I'm like, I want to go to work now. Although it's Friday. So you've been with iHeart for over 10 years. When you started, the company probably did not look like that. It had a completely different name. How was it when you started, and sort of what changes have you been involved in? Why were these changes happening?
It's an interesting question. The company, when I started, was the product of a roll-up of many different local radio groups. It used to be called Clear Channel. And the reason that I was interested in taking a job over there was because there were so many different radio companies that had been rolled up together. Some of them had websites, some of them didn't. And the guy who hired me in said, you know, we really need to deploy a digital strategy here that allow us to engage with our audiences off air. And I sort of took a look at that and I thought, there's a huge sleeping giant here. There's an enormous opportunity to engage with music fans. Everybody listens to radio. We, I think, fall into a very easy and incorrect assumption because we live in a coastal city like New York, and particularly in Manhattan, where people don't have cars and there's a lot of press, and there are a lot of people at agencies who don't drive cars, that in thinking that radio isn't maybe in some ways as scaled as it used to be. And it's exactly the opposite. Radio has only grown in the past 10 years. In 1973, 93% of the American public listened to radio on a weekly basis. So now today, 93% listen. And in that time, the country has grown enormously in terms of population. So radio's role, its reach, its impact is bigger than ever. And so I think what we all recognized pretty early on was that this was an opportunity to take local media and develop a national platform on top of that that would allow us to expose artists, music, great content to millions of people. Usually the way media companies work is they try to build national scale and then they try to deploy locally. AOL tried that with a product called Patch. You know, I think the jury's out on how easy that is to do. What we had at iHeartRadio that we understood from the very beginning was we had incredibly engaged local audiences that had these incredibly deep relationships with radio personalities. These relationships have emotional components quite different from, you know, a stack of records. These are people who are in your lives. They are the best friends sitting in the car next to you. They are keeping you company. It's a companionship model. It's very, very different than something that's more functional. So when you start to look at that, these extensions like events, like the iHeartRadio app that we built, like these social extensions, make a lot of sense because through these relationships you can build something extraordinary. I could keep going, but...
I know. I know you can keep going. I told you I would ask you one question, and then you would just talk and talk and talk for 30 minutes.
Sorry.
Right? So you talked about how, you know, the reach of radio has increased. We all know that sort of in the industry, we all feel that audio is booming, right? Everyone's talking about podcasts and music listening, and there are so many companies that have entered the space over the couple of years, right? Like Amazon, Google, Apple, Spotify, Pandora are just a few, right? What do you think makes iHeart unique, and how do we compete against all of these new entrants?
Yeah, so, I mean, we think about the world of music consumption or audio consumption in maybe a little bit of a different way. Sort of the traditional landscape of music consumption was sort of varying or sort of split between two poles. On the one hand, you had the radio. The radio is lean back, it's free, it's easy to use, it's universally accessible, it just works. It travels with you wherever you go, it's in your car, it's in your bedroom, there's over 1 billion radios, hardware radios in the country, and everyone has a radio in their pocket right now. They've got a phone, it acts like a radio, it does all the things a radio does. And then on the other side, there are music collections, right? And for 50, 60 years, people would find out about music that they wanted to spend money on through the radio or maybe through a friend telling them. But generally speaking, 70+% of Americans find out about music and songs that they love through the radio. And then they go and they do something about that in certain cases. They might have, in the past, bought an album or a cassette or a CD, or they might have downloaded a track from the iTunes Store or from the Google Play Store or what have you. And increasingly, that model has been disrupted entirely. The whole notion of buying a physical good for music is more or less outdated. And people are now subscribing to services that essentially allow you to rent the music as long as you continue to pay. Now, I think what people still forget, though, is discovery happens through radio. Radio hasn't been disrupted by digital. Radio has been enhanced and expanded through digital because now everyone carries a radio with them everywhere they go. And that's how people use their phones. It's one of the reasons we were the quickest to 90 million registered users, is because we explained to people through our radio stations that you could take your favorite station, your favorite personality, your favorite playlists, your favorite podcast with you wherever you went, and it was free, and it's called iHeartRadio. But we think the process has been broken because if you think about it, how do you find out? If you're listening to a radio station and you hear one dance and you don't know what that is, you got to take your phone out, maybe you Shazam it, or if you don't have your phone, maybe you got to write something down, or you got to remember, and then, you know, you don't go to the record store anymore, you might go into Spotify and you might search it, right? But the problem with that is if you're starting with Spotify, or you're starting with Apple Music, you got 40 million songs, a search box, and a dream. It's a lot to deal with, and most people don't subscribe to these services, not because they're not good services, they're very good services. It's because it's a lot of work. It costs money on top of everything else. And, you know, hopefully they can make a recommendation for you, but maybe they don't, and maybe you don't know what you want to listen to right now, and you got to do a lot of work. You got to configure it, you got to make it, you got to use it a lot so it knows what you like. So it's like the traditional way that our minds work has been upended. They're saying start with the search box. We're saying start with a radio, because it's free, you know what you're going to get. You understand that you have a relationship with these people. You trust that they're going to play you good music. That's how it works, which is why we were so proud last month to introduce this new set of features that will allow us to finally connect the dots. I'm sorry it took so long, but here we are. Finally connect the dots between music discovery, right, and then creating your own music collection, right? So in the beginning of January, we're going to be rolling out 2 paid services, one called iHeartRadio Plus, one called iHeartRadio All Access, that will allow you, when you're listening to your favorite station, to add a song to your playlist or to replay that song, with a whole bunch of other features. But the idea here is we understand and recognize that that music discovery model has been broken for some time. And so we're eager to square the circle.
And that's really sort of transformative, right? Because if you think about it, and we were talking in the green room, right, with a couple of the students here, and they were talking about their connection to radio and their connection to personalities, and how you hear a song on the radio, right, and you really, really love it, and you want to hear it again, right, or you want to share it with someone. And now, starting in January, right, with a click of a button, it's in your playlist. That's it. There's nothing more that you can do, and there's really, I think, no other company that can offer that connection.
Yes.
So
I agree.
So, you know, this is, I think this is the first time that music has been included officially in this conference, which is traditionally centered around video. And a lot of the discussions today were around video. And, you know, we started by sort of showing a video, right? A lot of consumers consume music through YouTube, which is all video-based. You see Spotify sort of going into the space. How does that impact iHeart as a company that is focused around audio? And, you know, how does that impact your job now as creating digital content?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the first thing to say is that we've been doing video for a long time in the company. And we see, we like to think of these things in terms of brand permission, right? And you have to be able to tell people a story about what makes sense. But if you think about it, if you think about the biggest personalities, people see Seacrest, for example, on YouTube all the time. They certainly see The Breakfast Club on YouTube. They've got a channel that has almost 1 million subscribers, and a whole bunch of other people who are ripping their content and throwing it up there. And so there's nothing new about this. I think what we need to do a better job of doing, one of the reasons why I took the challenge of, you know, my latest role here at the company, was to smartly bundle that together in a way that makes sense, right? To scale it to build it out as a capability, not just for our listeners, but also for our partners, right? And I think that is a lot of upside for us. And it's not something that comes without a little bit of work. When we first launched iHeartRadio a few years back, I don't know that everyone was accustomed to thinking of us as an app, right? But we're going to build it the same way we've built all of the very sensible product line extensions. How did we build our events platform? We got on the radio and we explained to people that we were going to build the coolest event in the iHeartRadio Music Festival with artists from every possible genre all coming together on one stage on 2 nights in Las Vegas, where basically every major city has a direct flight from, so that's easy. And we were going to create a world-stopping event with incredible artists from every genre, right? How did we explain to people why, how did we get people to download the app? We told them that it's going to be super easy, super fun, free to use, and because of these relationships, and it's the same thing. The way that we're growing the Breakfast Club on YouTube, the way that we're growing our video platforms through Snapchat, we have a Discover channel on Snapchat, is we're telling our listeners. They would love, I think one of the things that radio has struggled with as a medium is that radio has often been very willing to cede these areas where really they have every right to play to upstarts and startups in these fields, because they haven't fought for the right to play in these spaces when they have every right to, of course, right? So we're not going to go down like that. We're going to make it very clear to our 260 million monthly listeners that not only do we have this stuff, but we have great content and it's there for them.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about you. So how
My favorite subject.
My favorite subject as well. So how did you start in the industry? What was your first job out of college? What did you want to be when you grow up?
Well, I won't answer the last question because it's completely irrelevant. I wanted to be a doctor, but I think I've been involved in music making, and I've been a huge fan of music since I was an early teen, 12, 13 years old. Music changed my life for the better. I got involved in the local punk rock scene. I was going to CBGBs for matinees on the Lower East Side. Music saved my life in many, many different ways. And so I think as a teenager, I started to try to figure out, what could I do in this space that was meaningful for me? And I played in bands. I didn't ever think for a minute that I was going to become a rock star. I thought it was fun to play in bands, right? But I was going to go to college because I'm a nice Jewish boy from New Jersey, and that's what you do. You don't stop your life to go play. And you may be in the summertime or you gig, but then you go home and you do your homework. So that was not in my DNA necessarily, but I did know I wanted to be around music. And so really the first thing for me was trying to determine how I could make a difference. And so I just went to the Student Rec Center up at Columbia University where I was an undergrad, and I said, well, I'd like to volunteer to be on the concerts committee, and I'll help load gear in and out, and I'll learn about how to properly coil a cable, and help the sound guy, and bring water and M&Ms into the green room, and just get my hands dirty in any way. And then by the time I was a senior, I was managing the concerts committee, and then I got out of school, and this is going to seem incredibly irrelevant to younger people here, but there was this thing called the New York Times back then, and they had a help wanted section, and it was a paper, and you had to actually look at the paper, and then your hands would get dirty from the newsprint. And there was a job at a music production company in the New York Times, and it was a company that was funded by Sony Music. And I didn't ever think of myself as someone who was going to be a studio tech, but I thought it's close enough. And I didn't have a family connection. I didn't. My dad and mom weren't in the business, so I just hustled. I just tried to find angles to get in. I tried to talk to lots of people. I remember having many conversations when I was young. So a cousin, like 8th removed, knew a guy who was still very famous in the business, maybe more famous now. It was at a major music publishing company, and I begged and begged and begged, can I please? So he put me off, and finally he saw me for like 20 minutes, and I just remember him being incredibly distant and not friendly, and that really stuck with me, right? That really stuck with me. And all I wanted was to see, was there anything that I could learn? Can I help him in any way? I just wanted to find a way in, because I was so passionate about it, and I'd cut my teeth, and I felt like, I know a little bit about music, and I really want to, and I just felt so discouraged coming out of that. So, worst thing for me to admit in front of a room like this, but I always answer calls, I always respond to emails, because that really stuck with me. And for a lot of people, it's not clear How do you get started? There is no book that you can read. The books that you can read, by the way, don't trust them. They're not right. I mean, you can read about contract law, but you can't read about how to break into a business. I mean, it's just a lot of lather, rinse, and repeat. Don't get discouraged. You're going to hear no a lot. A lot of people are very busy. But it doesn't mean you get discouraged or you lose hope.
And once you started your career and you got to iHeart, right, and you've been, as I mentioned, with the company a very long time, how were you able to sort of navigate and create your roles? Because I think most of the roles that you stepped into weren't just roles that were there for someone to take, right? I think a lot of people think about their sort of career path and think, well, if I want to get, a title, more money, or bigger team, I sort of have to move somewhere else, whereas you sort of stayed in the same place and was able to create those opportunities.
Well, earlier in my career, that was the truth. I did move. I worked at a startup. I worked for a music production company, as I mentioned. For a little bit of time, I did my own thing. I learned how to code websites. One of the things that I learned in my first music production job was that artists, this is the mid-'90s, it's like the Paleolithic era, that artists were starting to use these things called websites to have direct communication with their fans. This thing was unheard of. Who's on the World Wide Web, and Netscape 1.0 and the whole business. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. Let me make sure I know how to do this. And there was a minute there in 1998 where I was making my own websites and doing it for fun. And then I worked at a startup. And but when I got to iHeart, I think one of the opportunities that was there was just this idea that the company was honest about the fact that it didn't have a digital strategy. And so there was an opportunity for me and my colleagues to make a difference. And we were a small team. I don't pretend to have any incredible, fortune-telling abilities. What I would say is I've been flexible, and I have not sought to make the world the way I want it to be. I've sort of seen the way the world is, and I've tried to look for areas where I can contribute. I was the GM of the digital team until June of this year, but in the beginning of the year, our CEO, who's really legendary in the business and was one of the founders of MTV and ran AOL and just is an incredible visionary, started asking us very, very good, pointed questions about our content strategy, right? And at first I was like, okay, and I just started saying, these are good questions. Let me start digging in. And it was not my day job, but I started to just sort of dig in, do some research, understand what the opportunities were, where there was upside. And, that's how you wind up getting a new job and growing. And I think it's the case in our company more than any other company I've worked at. You don't get the job first. You do the work first, and then you get the job.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I feel like I started 3 years ago, came in as a manager, really sort of focused on the broadcast, but there was this thing in my role of revenue strategy and analytics called digital that sort of was dabbled with, but not really handled. And I sort of dived into that and created my own role, and I oversee digital revenue management practice today. So it's definitely a company that allows that, right? Like
Thank God.
You see a problem, you want to go solve it, like go ahead and figure it out. There's maybe opportunity there. And that's
yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, though, because in big companies, you assume that someone's going to say, okay, we need to fill this org. It just rarely happens that way. I mean, I talk to friends of mine who are doing things like VR at other media companies. Nobody started the year saying, we're going to have a virtual reality division. It's like, it doesn't work like that. You have to try to find a solution. Can you find a partner who wants to work with you and develop something on spec? Can you deliver a prototype? Just by working some extra hours, can you deliver some insights or analytics that help to guide the strategy of the company on the revenue side or on the audience side? That's, to me, I think, you have to be, what is this all, like, we'll boil it all down. Curiosity. Curiosity is the #1 ingredient. And, willingness to just put in the hours.
What excites you about the future of music and the future of iHeart?
Well, as I said, I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not a tea leaf reader. What I would say is I'm excited about iHeart because we really pay close attention to the audiences. We have a laser focus on music fans, the folks who are in our radio listening audiences. What are they interested in? So instead of worrying so much about you know, how the future is going to play out. What we really look to do is to be real students, bring that curiosity back again, as I just mentioned, into, we look at the patterns. We have a very analytics-driven approach. There are lots of emerging platforms. We met with someone earlier today who directs virtual reality films, and we were talking about, you know, could you take a virtual reality camera backstage at Jingle Ball to get people the feel of what it's like to be at this incredible event? And, you know, you've got Alessia Cara going by, you know, on one side and Justin Bieber coming by on the other, for fans of either of those artists. And this idea of all these great artists in one place at one time in this event, and, you know, there's Dr. Oz in one corner and Elvis Duran in the other, and, you know, just how funny and interesting all those mixes of people are. So I think there will be lots of fun things we can try and experiment. We don't pretend that we know, and that's one of the reasons why we take a kind of promiscuous approach to how we distribute the app, right? So we were a launch partner with the Samsung Gear O. I don't know if anyone here has a Samsung Gear O. Not because we knew or didn't know that that was going to be like the most popular smartwatch, but because it might have been, and you don't know. We were really, really insistent on being an Apple Watch launch partner, right? Why was that so? We could have just said, hey, you know, an Apple Watch, it's going to come out of the gate. Maybe the first gen is not going to be so hot, and then, you know, we'll wait and see. No, we didn't want to wait and see. You know, for lots of reasons. One, you never know, and that's exciting too, getting your hands dirty, understanding new technologies, getting early access to new platforms. That really keeps things fresh, but also because any one of these things could wind up being an enormous hit.
So I want to open it up to students in a couple of minutes, but just last question. What would be your advice to the students here if they wanted to break into the industry?
A lot of persistence. But I think other than that, which I think is the case pretty much in any industry, is do some homework, right? So I occasionally have people who come to me and they go, I really want to break into the music industry. I go, okay, great. That's awesome. What area? Do you want to do product? Are you interested in marketing? Would you like to do PR? Are you interested in doing A&R?
What about analytics?
Or analytics, actually.
Revenue strategy?
All of it. And they go, well, I really like music. And so I think it's incumbent on students to know not only the first answer to that question, but even the second answer. So you go, okay, I want to go in the music industry. I really want to understand how data is informing A&R music choices now that we have all this data coming out of platforms like you know, iHeartRadio and Spotify and iTunes and so on. So this is all coming out. So that's going to change, that might change the way, so have an opinion, have a point of view. That might change the way we think about how we sequence the release of songs from an album, or even how we A&R and choose artists, you know, how are we looking at Shazam data. So then the second question might then be, okay, what do you think, right? Or what role do you want to play in that? So have that answer ready too, because most people who are in a position to help you are very busy. And if you can give them pointed and specific direction about how they can help you, you're going to make them happy. You're going to make it easy for them to help you. So I'm really interested in marketing jobs where I get to use my analytical approach, and I have experience. You know, I studied statistics in college and so on, and I want to get involved and help the A&R teams find new artists. Wow, that's a great answer. Okay, I know some folks in A&R. Okay, I know some folks in the analytics team. I know the woman who runs the analytics team at Universal Music. She is a great person to talk to. I will introduce you. If you can get that, then you're winning. Because out of 4 or 5 calls that you do, or out of 4 or 5 emails you send, you're probably going to get good direction from 2 or 3 of those.
Don't forget that when you email Owen after the conference. So any questions from the crowd?
Hi, my name is Maximo. I'm a digital communications and media major at NYU. First of all, I want to say I enjoy the Breakfast Club's interviews. They're amazing. Keep them up. And I want to say I'm happy for the success of iHeartMedia because I've seen them in the past in applications on the phones, and it's amazing. But what like mindset do you go into with like every day, you know, with challenges, new challenges, seeing how we've been through Napster and LimeWire and pirating, like what's the mindset with the whole group? Like what do you go into every day when you want to create this content for your audience?
Well, you know, the group that you're talking about, you know, is lots of groups, right? So for the product team, it's all about creating an entirely new kind of music experience that's going to scratch an itch that no one can scratch, right? And how we're uniquely positioned to do that. So then it's like executing against the vision. And how do you do that in a way that's exciting, right? If you're just another music app, you have to find ways to differentiate yourself. But, you know, we have a mission, and that sort of starts from the top down. If you are on the music programming team, you know, there might be a different answer to those questions, right? You know, how do you leverage the relationships we have that are unique to us? I think it starts with an understanding of the company and saying, okay, where are we strong and where are we weak? We think about, you know, in areas that we're strong, we want to own all of that. We want to take best advantage we can. In areas where we're not so strong, do we look to partner? You know, are there other opportunities for us? So again, I think it goes back to curiosity, but it also goes back to a real strong focus on looking at the company and being really honest, right? Really honest. But usually, not always the case, usually in music and entertainment and pop culture, people bring a lot of their own enthusiasm because people come to it first as fans. So you know, it's always good to have some self you know, awareness. You know, I spend a lot of time with gratitude, right? I'm very grateful to be in this business. I'm very grateful to be surrounded by creative people. You know, you have to operate from out of gratitude because this is I think it's a wonderful company. I know it's a wonderful company, and we have lots of opportunities to bring smiles to people's faces, right? We were talking about it earlier. Like, we're not making, you know, sugary snacks that give kids diabetes, right? You gotta, like, that's one that's, you know, how am I doing today? Oh, only 3 kids died today. You're doing great. So it's like, it's not like that, right? And also radio is like a community service, right? So I think the industry in and of itself, picking the right industry that turns you on every day is such a, and obviously you're doing that, right? Because you're a communications major. So it's one of those things where you really want to match your vocation with your avocation, right? What are you here to do with what can you do, right, to contribute?
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Wei. Currently a finance major in Pace University. I know people in finance, we talk about numbers all the time. The question to you guys is, in terms of pattern recognition as well as creativity, how do you apply that? Or can you elaborate the art of applying creativity to analytics?
Data is absolutely critical to our company. We have billions of data points alone just from the iHeartRadio app, and we have a team of data scientists who are looking at ways to make the music experience for our users better. And whether that's, you know, very specific applications, like how do you make the algorithm that drives the custom playlists in our app better, more sticky, more engaging, to how do you take that data and extract it so that a radio programmer or even someone like Charlemagne can look at it and go, okay, this is what's popping right now, this is what's interesting, here's what's coming up. You know, radio is very different from other mediums. It's live and it's continuous, right? And so it ebbs and flows. So understanding when a song needs to be rotated more quickly, i.e. hear it more often, you know, in the playlist, versus, okay, you know what, it's super popular right now, it's starting to wane, and how do you start to slowly reel that back? All of that is driven by data and analytics. So not only, you know, the obvious software, hardware implications of, you know, the app and data science and, you know, Hadoop clusters, but also very specifically how human beings think about programming radio stations. How long should a talk break be? How long should a segment be? All of that stuff can be informed, not necessarily driven exclusively, but informed by data. So we as a company need people badly who are data fluent and who are curious about how that data can make people, you know, have more enjoyable experiences when they listen to the radio, when they listen to music. Like, that's critical. If you're doing it all on gut, you're doing it wrong. Good question.
Do we have time for one more question? One more question?
If there is one more question. Wow, was I that boring? Tough.
You just answered everything.
Okay, so this question's a little like, it's related to iHeartRadio, but not in how do I get in the industry. Although I really am interested. Okay, so first off, what are you looking for in someone that wants an internship so bad at iHeartRadio? Like, qualification-wise?
I mean, the first thing is it's a recognition that if you're applying for an internship, there's no expectation that you've got 5, 10, 20 years. I mean, you're an intern, right?
Right.
So I think that part of it is going to be a question of cultural fit and, what do we need, and, where are there areas of, where having interns are going to help us move the ball forward for the company. And we have internships across a broad array of divisions. We had about 80 interns who are working with the sales and marketing team. We had interns who are working on the dev and product side. The radio stations often take programming or promotions interns. Z100's been doing that for years, and they often hire them, and they often become senior executives at the company. I can name 3 or 4 of those folks. Or they go work at record companies, or they go work at other music or media companies. What we're looking for are creative, curious, hardworking people. It's really not much harder than that. We recognize, I mean, if you've got relevant coursework in that area, so if you have a sales and marketing background and you want, in terms of you're taking marketing courses, you're taking courses that have an analytics bent, I mean, maybe that's helpful. But I don't think there's an expectation. What we want are people who are really excited to be there, really excited, and are willing to roll up their sleeves and go the extra mile. So cheesy to say those things, but it's absolutely true.
Okay, thank you. I also do have another question. Does analytics apply to choosing the artists that are in your region for Jingle Ball?
Yes.
That's how it works?
Well, look, it's art and science, right? So who has an album that's out right now that they're promoting, right? Who's on the radio right now, right? Where are those artists popular? We absolutely look at things like play counts and spins and number of thumbs and what songs are really percolating, and call out research, which is a very tried and true way of determining interest in a song. Shazam interactions, YouTube plays. I mean, we're very open to different data platforms and sources because we think more data is better.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So I think that was it. Just thank you, Owen, and thank you, everyone, for sticking around. This has been fun.
Thanks, Leerone. Thanks, everyone.